Well, thank you for joining us for our Jitterbit Shopware Content Basis collab webinar. I'm David Rastatter. I'll be channeling your questions in throughout the session, and then at the end, we'll actually leave time so we can actually ask our awesome panelists those questions. This is getting the max headroom out of your tech stack with iPaaS and AI. So many of you may know the 80s reference we did use from Max Headroom. If not, you're free to Google that. It's a amazing TV show, sort of cops and robbers, using very, very primitive AI, and that kind of spawned this title thanks to Ben. So with that, I'd like to sort of go over what we're going to do today. We're going to do a quick intros with the panelists, then we're going to go through some of the questions that we came up with on the topics of AI, iPaaS, integration, and commerce, and then we're going to go into our Q&A. And to do that, we'd like you to use your control panel at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button. Go ahead and feel free to use that to ask us questions. And then, as I said, we'll leave time at the end of the session to go ahead and answer those. On the panelists today, we have Dave Malda, who's here with me from Jitterbit. We have Ben Marks from Shopware and Brent Peterson from Content Basis. So with that, Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Excellent. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. As David said, the Max Headroom reference kind of had a playback for myself, and I think for a couple of the other panelists as well. So we're excited to share with you today. I'll start with the first question. We've got 5 here that we're going to go through over the next 30 minutes. And as questions come up or as things come up, be sure to save them for the end, because as David said, we'll open the floor and also answer those questions. So first question for Brent and for Ben is, what challenges are businesses facing now when it comes to managing multiple applications with retail and e-commerce? And how does headless commerce play into this? So Ben, maybe we'll start with you and then move over to Brent.
Well, thanks. Hopefully you guys can hear me well. I'm coming to you from the Mediterranean coast here in Italy. I mean, it's, what's interesting to me about this business is that what's old is new, what's new is problems of old. And, it's always a question of, there's always been a question of orchestration, but I think orchestration is really coming to the forefront now. And what we know is that, as different applications have grown, so there are amazing providers, whether it's remarketing, targeting, personalization, it doesn't matter. All of these applications that have survived, have evolved, during the last 10 years of e-commerce. They all have started to kind of grow their sphere of influence. And so coordination, depending on the perspective of the business that's implementing them, coordination among these things becomes more and more important, right? And really being able to decide which system is system of record and where the processes should flow through. And for me, that's a challenge, but with every challenge is an opportunity. And that's why it really makes sense to start to focus on the orchestration layer of your commerce stack. Brent, I'm sure you have something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that headless was the buzzword a couple of years ago, and everybody thought, oh, this is going to make our lives easier. And in some cases it did. In most cases, especially for mid-sized merchants, it made it incredibly more complex. I do think that having that orchestration layer and knowing where your source of truth is for all those pieces is the most important thing you want to do. And you need to start by documenting that and running that in a way that where all that data should live. So your customer records, maybe they're going to live in a CRM. Your e-commerce things are going to live in something like Shopware. and maybe your fulfillment is going to be in NetSuite or SAP. All those parts need to be put together. Where does your basic product live? Maybe you have a PIM. I think that having that all in place before you even start with the orchestration is step number one. But now people really need to think about where do they want that data to live, and then more importantly, how's that data going to get from system A to system B?
Thank you, Brent, and thank you, Ben. And maybe just enhance on this question a little bit. So in your experience, the two of you, who determines which path you go down as far as these headless components? Like, is someone coming to you and saying, okay, this is what we need, or is it more of a consultative approach where, you know, you're sort of understanding the business and then making recommendations? Just curious. Probably a loaded question.
I can say that. Yeah. Well, Brent and I have both spent time in agencies. I worked at an agency. Brent, had an agency. So, we know that usually it's the messaging that gets put out often by the platforms, by the e-commerce solutions. They help guide like what the what the merchant is actually asking for. But what we're really doing, I think, as an industry, is kind of a disservice. What we have done in the past is a disservice, right? Merchants should never focus on the technology approach to a solution. It should always be like focusing on their requirements. And so I know, Brent, you and I have had so many of these conversations, formally and informally. When a merchant walks in and says, I need headless, our first question is, and actually, I think, you guys at Jitterbit also will say the same thing. Like, what do you think you mean by that?
Yeah, and I think, what does it mean that
we might use more words to kind of soften the blow, but basically, like, what? Yeah. I mean, what problem are you actually trying to solve? We want people to be requirement focused rather than sort of architecture focused. So getting people into a problem solving mindset, that's the best common diction that we all have.
Yeah, I think what an agency would go down, and part of the problem is that they have an agenda and they're really working towards that agenda, and then the platforms have an agenda. So you go to a conference, the CTO of your company goes to a conference, they see at the conference that everybody's doing progressive web apps. They come back, they talk to the leadership team and say, we have to have a PWA because everybody is doing it. What does that mean? I'll find out what it means, and let's get an implementation partner. Let's just do it, right? And pretty soon, a year later, you've spent X amount of money and you've maybe gotten halfway there, or you've gotten all the way there. And now, how do we maintain this? I think a lot of times, a lot of these decisions are made from a conference, and then they go into it, they do it, and they don't think about how all those pieces are going to go together later. And then even from that standpoint, I want to add another feature. Oh, well, that feature now has to also get connected. So it does lend the importance of looking at the orchestration part of it and where that data is going to live and how that data is going to get to different places.
Yeah. I mean, this all comes from, sorry, just to jump in right before we go to the next question. It really comes down to everyone's looking for the IBM coverage, right? Everyone's looking for, like, basically no one gets fired for choosing IBM. That's been the mantra for how many years in tech, and everyone's looking for that same kind of coverage. But again, I really think the message gets
this is real max headroom here, I think.
We're saying, well, if I implement this thing that people are talking about, I'm with A, but rather, really, what are you trying to do?
I think he dropped off that.
It's breaking up a little bit, Ben, but definitely a good max headroom impersonation, no doubt.
Yeah, I want to say that I'm coming from the warm and sunny Mediterranean coast of Minneapolis. We have a lot of coasts here, so I'm sitting in a basement, though, not overlooking A wonderful view.
Perfect. So
I think I'm back. I made a good point, but it's over now. Let's go on to the next question.
No worries. No worries. We'll go to the second question. So the second question is, what do you mean by having max headroom in your integration environment, and how does iPaaS come into play? And Ben, I thought we'd start with you.
So really, it's all about freedom of movement, right? So real quickly, before I drop again into the Ligurian coast, you know, anytime you add a new technology to your overall solution footprint, you're introducing a little complexity. There's always a trade-off. There's never a decision without consequences in tech, right? That's modern Newtonian physics 101. The great thing about an iPaaS solution is all you're doing is you're trading just a little bit of, like, you know, introducing another system, and you are gaining so much freedom of movement, freedom of orchestration, essentially an environment for federating communication among multiple systems. Brent, back to your point about PIM, resource management, like whatever the case is, however you need to orchestrate systems amongst each other, and however that information needs to flow, how much that needs to model your organizational complexity. You can do that. You can do that with point to point with systems, but as you start to grow and the complexity of your needs starts to grow, the size of your organization grows, you end up with tremendous advantage when you create a space, essentially a green field, to start to orchestrate these things. That's what an iPaaS solution does, in my mind.
Yeah, I think a great way to look at it too is the commonality of where your data goes in and out, and you can plug and play different systems into that. And even if you're in different regions, let's say you have one system in Canada and you have one system in the UK. Maybe that system needs a different PIM or a different e-commerce backend, or more likely you'd have a different fulfillment area. This allows you to plug in a new SAP or a new ERP, a new 3-letter acronym into your system and have it have a common place where it sees all that data. I think that's the biggest the biggest thing iPaaS gives you is the ability to take in and put in and remove or add a new system into the whole into your own environment, and allow that data to go to the place where it needs to go.
Yeah, I think, like, very interesting points from both of you. I think, what I've seen over the years as well is, and what's helped is having people walk you through, let's call it the manual processes that happen, right? So an order comes in, then what happens? And as you walk through these different steps, you start to understand all of the different systems and all of the different touches that happen along the way. And then it's great to just take all that information and say, okay, there may be a better way to do this, right? There may be a better way to do this, or maybe what you're doing right now is perfect. There's just a lot of manual intervention. And I've always found you uncover some pretty wonderful things along the way when you say, okay, can you show this to me? What happens? An order comes in, and then what? And I think to both of your points, you see all of the different systems and all of the different things you need to plug in. And, at the end of the day, hopefully folks' lives become a lot easier, and the customer experience, becomes so much better, right? People are not lost in, well, where's my email with the tracking number, or, et cetera, right? So any other additional points, guys, before we move to the next question?
No, I think it was all said pretty well. I mean, it really is about having freedom of movement, freedom to orchestrate, and especially probably something that shouldn't get lost, though, is it's not just about freedom and requirements as they exist today. It's also about what's coming down the road.
Yeah, sort of that future look, right, Ben? And okay, so now I have this. Can I easily add that in, right? So, yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
So third question. How is Shopware adapting to the business needs of today? And certainly, if folks follow Shopware on LinkedIn or even on Twitter, there's daily updates, and it looks like you guys are doing some pretty cool stuff over there, Ben.
Well, we're doing our best. Hopefully, well, if if I drop off, Brent, I'm sure you can take the wheels for me here, but most recently we've introduced, I think we're going to get to some AI content later in this webinar, but so we were the first platform to drop a full AI suite, mostly focused on operations, actually, on really amplifying the efforts of the store operators and the different people who are working behind the scenes. But in general, sort of architecturally, we're designed for flexibility. We're designed for integration. I mean, we're built for customization because we know that, even as big as the SaaS solutions are, and as much of the market as they provide, or as they serve, that's like 10% in the US, I think. That's Shopify, right? 10%, right? 90%, and they want to build the biggest box ever. Something our president Jason Nyes talks about regularly. Is that it's just the challenge of e-commerce is a tough challenge to solve for everyone, and that's why like 90% of the market doesn't fit in Shopify's box. It really comes down to customization and solving the needs of the operators, solving the desires of the customers, and we're all about that customization, that custom scope. So we engineered ourselves from the ground up to solve those problems, to be able to adapt and build whatever you want. And not only just in a reactive way to what the market trends are, but also in a way that really, our ultimate goal is that if you can think it, you can build it. And that means that we really index on ingenuity, and we want our customers to be building the sort of the next standard of experiences, because e-commerce is an industry. From an experience standpoint, it's iterative. It's always evolving. It's always building on what came before. Yeah, we want to be future-proof by actually allowing people to invent their own future. That's what we do, and we do that. We do that with our approach, which is, API first. We can facilitate headless. I'm getting into some of that architectural stuff that I prefer merchants to not think of primarily. But the challenges that merchants have in the hands of capable partners, both agency partners and technology partners, start putting this together. We build in freedom of movement as well, not unlike iPaaS does. So if you think it, you can build it. That's what we build for. And then as new things come along, like especially with the advent of ChatGPT, which I think we can all say AI is now super overhyped, but the practicality of solutions is there, and it really should be additive to what store ops people are doing day to day. At least right now, it's going to evolve over time. So we want to have a pragmatic. We want to take a pragmatic approach, and I think that's what we've done. And I know this is also what the other platforms are working on as well. So as an industry, I'm glad to see us all moving forward together with this. I'm not going to pretend we're the only ones doing it. Yeah. Brent, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I'll give it a good plug in the fact that a lot of the platforms in the past have relied on developers to do a lot of these things that happen especially in the operations portion of it. And what the Copilot AI has done for Shopware, along with the rule builder and the flow builder, those tools that were already there, has allowed your marketing team or your operations team to build a lot of those things inside of Shopware that would normally in another platform would have to happen or be done by a developer, or in a platform that is living in the cloud would have to happen outside of the system completely. You'd have to build some kind of an app, then you'd have to use an iPaaS to connect the app, and then you'd have to hopefully make sure that all those things are working in that orchestration part. Not that orchestration isn't important, but what Shopware has introduced is the ability to make a lot of these things within Shopware without having a developer get involved.
And Dave, I think so one of the things, I guess another sort of dimension to add to the iPaaS discussion is, what we're really talking about is, ironically, from a software company standpoint, the better we are at our jobs, the less people feel like the kind of tool that they're using. It's just sort of I sit down in front of my in my laptop, or I walk around the warehouse with my iPad, and and I can do my work. I'm not thinking about I'm interacting with software. This is the kind of experience we're trying to drive, where we almost just blend into the background. And I can't think of a better sort of analogy for what iPaaS helps facilitate. Is, is really this kind of this glue that binds, it binds everything together smoothly, so that people aren't, they aren't feeling the transition from system to system or anything else. It's all just this integrated experience. It's all heads up. It's all immediate, and people just get their job done. That's I think that for us is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it too, the flexibility. I've seen certain cases where maybe an API is somewhat limited, or even just the availability of inserting data or maybe reading data is limited, and it can really cause some frustrations, right? And so I think having Shopware as a very flexible platform, it just allows use cases that may be complex or that require certain pieces of data. It allows us to be able to, like you said, make that experience for the end user and the end customer that much better, right? When it's put in a box and somewhat limited, you get into all kinds of funny different scenarios that really make things even more complicated, right? So would you say, Ben, like your maybe certain verticals, we don't have to be too long on this, but do you do well in certain verticals, or even just like the size of a business? Any insight there?
Yeah. So it's essentially a really good qualifying question. Depending on audience, we tend to see. I think businesses tend to realize a lot of value from us when we are serving segments with requirements that are that aren't solved in the box, right? So that tends to be anywhere from 2 to 5, like GMV, gross merchandise volume, annual kind of sales. Like it's a really blunt instrument, and as an industry we use it a lot, but it is a convenient shorthand, right? So again, the borders are fuzzy at the lower and upper bounds, 2 to 5, and somewhere in there, that's where a lot of the value starts to be realized for people building Shopware. And it doesn't have to be the revenue or the income that's happening, the sales that are happening like today. It can also be what's going to happen in the near future. And then as you start to get up into the enterprise space, it starts to that at scale, there is no system that is scale proof. Like everything, because scale is arbitrary in multiple dimensions, it really does come down to the kinds of conversations that you can have, not and the kind of space available to you, like in the stack that you're using. And there again, you're really looking for a solution that is flexible. But then especially at the upper end, you really want to be working with vendors who are willing to do the one-to-one work. So we recently launched a professional services group, which is it's not designed to be in competition with agencies. It's really there to say, like, hey, here are the people who've actually built this application that is a major part of your solution stack. So let's have these same people say, like, if you have some arbitrary requirement, like we need to update all 5 million prices in our catalog every 15 minutes. Guess what? There aren't many systems that will scale in that way without some kind of customization. And so what we want to do is we want to put our experts who built this stuff in the first place right next to the people doing, with the requirements, the merchant, and then also alongside the agencies who are building the overall solution and orchestrating, not just with us as an e-commerce solution, but with the other integrations, to make sure that we're tailoring something that really helps the system meet those needs. So I don't know if that answers the question exactly, but I again, that's the approach that we take, and it's emblematic of our philosophy of collaboration. Again, our success is 100% reliant on our customer success.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that, Ben. Thanks for the insight there. I think This next question is we're going to start with Brent, but I've been waiting for this one. This is a good question. So Brent and Ben, how is AI helping businesses use data to identify opportunities to improve, product, service delivery, branding, etc. Right? So a great question. And Brent, I know you're quite heavily involved in AI, and we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think if you look at some of those marketing tasks that marketers have done in the past and have to rely on spreadsheets or whatever, that AI now has given that jump start to take, you could take a whole spreadsheet of data and you could feed that into an engine, let's say ChatGPT, and ask it to analyze that for you and have it come back with what are the outcomes that I would like to see in this data. One of the unique things, or one of the exciting things that Shopware has done, is they're building some of those things already. The Copilot is built into Shopware itself. So a lot of those things that you'd like to see, some of these analytical things, I think that the generative AI is exciting. Like for marketers, let's create tweets and let's write content. Right. The more exciting parts are going to be that predictive analytics that we can see by feeding that data into an AI or an NPL and letting it do some of the work that we would have done manually in the past, or we've had to have some proprietary engine that chunks through that data, right? We can be a little bit more nimble. We can look at some of that incoming data and then decipher and even come up with some hypotheses around that to help our team maybe make a new marketing campaign, or let's A/B test those two things, or even better, let's have it automatically come up with 2 A/B tests and run those A/B tests simultaneously without even us deciding what they are. The risks now are that we have an A/B test that runs for a day that gets no sales, right? But we've at least learned that something gets no sales. Maybe it was obvious, and hopefully the engine is going to learn from that. I think looking at what ChatGPT does, and then looking at the next phase where we'll have our own little mini ChatGPTs that are going to run on our website that are going to learn from that, are the really exciting things that are going to happen down the road in the future.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
I think that
go ahead.
The next little thing that I'm just going to chime in on, I think are going to be exciting, are smart chatbots. So like if you think of a customer service assistant that would maybe know something about a product, you'd have a chat that knows everything about every single attribute that's attached to your product, right? And then it's also going to know about all the other products you have in your catalog. So you can start asking about what is the best lens for my camera, what kind of whatever f-stop should I have, right? It's going to tell you some of these things. It's going to know intimately more than, I hate to say it, but it'll know more than a human would know across a broader spectrum, and allow you to bring in other products that are related to that lens for that camera that are going to give the consumer a better view on what they could be buying, and then some recommendations on other products that would be related to that.
Any thoughts from you at all, Ben? I mean, that's great, Brent. I think you nailed it. But anything left, Ben?
I have some thoughts. For me, it's and Brent, I love your examples. It comes out of postulate, evaluate, iterate, and the cool thing about AI is it can be always on, right? And you can take not from a sort of a capitalist worker exploitation standpoint. Yes, this could be seen as a bad thing, but from where I sit, AI should always be additive. We just because it is a computer, an algorithm doing these things, we've been augmenting, our actual, our personal toil for years and years. I mean, that's like, you look at what the internet did, the web has done for this species. There's good and bad, but there's a ton of good, and there's in terms of output efficiency, there's a lot there, right? So what AI does, well implemented, is, again, it should be additive to the work that human beings are doing, and it should free us up, just like physical tools freed us up years ago. I mean, these, like, this Neolithic history here, where I am today, tools allowed it to evolve into this society that we have. AI is the same thing. It's same thing, but it's a little less physical, right? So we are at the very beginning of having the things that we need, the tools that we need to take industry into the next era. That's literally what's happening right now. So, and I really like the example of chatbots, because we have all, at this point, I think, interacted with chatbots that 100% suck and leave us, fortunately not yelling at a customer service agent, because no one ever should, but really, like I've yelled at my computer screen trying to get flights rebooked or find out information or something from my preferred flight vendors. What might be an interesting thing to do is to actually archive these chatbots and how they're built and the information they're drawing from, like, and just sort of see the progression over time, because for sure in 5 to 10 years, and hell, in another generation, you're not going to be able to tell. That's going to be a little bit scary for those of us who haven't grown up with it, but within 15 to 30 years, it's just going to be normal. And again, that's just it's just going to be an evolution of what we have, of what we've experienced all along. It's just one person can do more. Now, for me, the reason AI is hitting now, AI has been around for a while. I mean, you all at Jitterbit, you've been dealing with, you have this transactional insight into what your customers and the various integrated vendors, like you kind of know what's flowing where. There's a lot of data there. Personalization vendors, intelligent search vendors, recommendation vendors, like these companies were at the forefront in e-commerce of dealing with big data, working in the AI machine learning space. What has been so special about the sort of the chat GPT moment has been that we now have a natural language interface into this sort of inconceivable sea of data that we have. And that's what's been really interesting, is that we now, one person sitting at at his or her desk or coffee table or whatever, working for just selling shoes, selling fashion, selling whatever, now has the ability to to start to build systems and take on activities and understand their customers at a greater depth than they ever have before. So it really is about empowerment, and that for me is the most exciting thing about AI. And and for the record, like Shopware, yes, we the hype curve went like hockey stick when ChatGPT came out, and we were the vendor that hopped right up there. But guess what? The good news is, for every single person working in this space, we're all chasing that same dragon, right? So we might have been first, but we have to keep working at it and working at it fervently, which we're doing. And I know all the other vendors are. So again, this is what's going to push this evolution along. I'm going to be really, really excited to come back and watch this webinar in like 4 to 5 years from now, and just see how completely naive we all sound talking about this. Because I think, because this is such an insidious and like empowering technology, we're just not even getting some of the subtleties that are going to be obvious in the future. We just don't even appreciate them right now. I know that's what's going to happen. That's what happened. That's what happened with the web. It's what's going to happen with where we go from here. That's what I'm excited about.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks, Ben. And Brent, I think just with the content basis, right? You're using AI, I think, in a slightly different way, right? But maybe 30 seconds on that and the things that you're doing with AI.
Yeah, we are using it to give us some of that predictions on what we think people are going to look at. We do that by just looking at impressions and things like that are happening already. But we're also using it to generate content. I will add that we are adding the element of a human being in that to make sure that that content is what people think they should be reading. You know, editing it, making sure you take all the dumb things that AI puts in it. And then as a third part where we're having a subject matter expert read it to make sure that it resonates with whoever the target audience is. The mistake that people are making, and the mistake that I have made, and I put out a lot of content, and people, you know, you can see the garbage stuff compared to the stuff that's a little better. The better stuff is the stuff that's edited, right? And we have a team of editors that goes through it. The stuff that I hurry through, that I send to ChatGPT, and then I just put it up as a post, is the stuff that's garbage. And that's the stuff that Google's going to start really hitting you and penalizing you on. So I think the important part is that human intervention is the part that's needed, right? Because really, you're not generating the content for other AI engines to read the content. You're generating it for a human to read it. And the ultimate goal for that is to convert, to bring you to a place that sells a product or a service. The ultimate goal is to educate somebody about something or add more value to that product or service. And by polluting the internet, which I'm guilty of polluting, right? Whether it be a dad joke or whether it be some crazy post about crickets, without making sure that it resonates, is where AI has gotten a bad rap, right? So think about using it for some predictions, using it to create your content, but making sure that's good, and then following up with, hey, is this even working? Is this resonating with anybody?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah, like any other you know, new employee, like they need supervision. That's where AI is right now, especially when it comes to generative content.
Yeah.
And I think as a marketer, you need to be open to the criticism that people, you have to have some thick skin. And what I do is I go out and I say, hey, give me the 2 cents on this. Tell me what you think about this article that I wrote. And they'll say, well, Brent, this sounds, you know, I can say, Aaron Sheehan has been great and just telling me, hey, Brent, this sounds like SEO crap. Okay, good. Like then I learn from it, right? And then you learn from your team learns on what should be written. You don't want SEO crap. You don't want a fluff, right? And I think in the very beginning, certainly some of those tools that people use to create content gave you a lot of keyword stuffing SEO fluff.
Yeah, that's Aaron, and we should probably mention Aaron Sheehan. I'm a director of strategy or something at BigCommerce. Brent, you and I have known him for years. Really good guy, good person to watch and follow. He would have even been a great addition to this, but he couldn't be here, so I'm here.
Perfect. So last question, gentlemen. Fifth and last question. Again, you know, focused on AI, but the question is, how is AI technology going to elevate integration technology? So, you know, Brent, maybe you want to start, and we'll go to Ben. But curious on your thoughts with just integration in general in AI.
Yeah, this is where I think it's going to go. And of course, I don't run something like Jitterbit or another iPaaS service, but I feel as though the best thing we're going to get from that is the ability to automatically connect some of the API endpoints together. And then using an AI engine to find out if it knows everything about NetSuite and it knows everything about Shopware, what are the parts that we could be testing and adding? And then hopefully that we don't have to have a developer get involved to make sure it happens, but that AI engine is going to go and connect those points together automatically. And then we can test it, right? So not that we want to take away developers, but I think that we're going to have less of that rudimentary or more time-consuming development work and more of that thinking development work going to happen. I think that's the exciting part that's going to happen with AI and iPaaS.
Yeah, there's a lot less time and effort spent on, you know, figuring out the minutia, you actually get to sort of do work on the 20% that matters, right? And this is a conversation. So I've been fortunate to have this conversation with many much smarter people who've been thinking about these kinds of problems for a long time. One is Chris Bach, who is one of the co-founders of Netlify. You know, it was a conversation I had with him earlier this year at Shop Talk in Europe, where he kind of pointed out that, you know, the coming moment for orchestration. Like it's been evolving, right? There's a reason Kubernetes came around. There's a reason sort of a microservices approach has come around for large enterprise businesses. And, you know, one of the challenges, the friction to adoption, the friction to motion there is just like, you know, big problems, big solutions, big budgets, big effort. What we all know, seem to agree is coming, is that AI, as it becomes better and better, and people start to apply AI to infrastructure challenges, that AI will become this glue that binds, and you will be able to do things in the future like, hey, just basically say, you know, log into your e-commerce backend. I'll take again, I'm going to see this in 5 years and just shake my head, but for a straw man for today, we're going to be featured on, you know, a major morning news show tomorrow, our product or offering. We need to scale up for, you know, 10x our business. Like, literally issue that command into your commerce stack, and it's just going to do it. That's where we're headed, right? And probably eventually it'll just also happen automatically, and we'll be focusing on other problems. Again, it frees us up to think about ever higher and higher concerns. So AI, you know, can be the glue that binds in terms of right now, in terms of generating content, in terms of understanding, you know, connecting us to the data of what's happening in our systems and in our solution stack. In the future, it's going to be sort of just right there interstitially throughout our solution stack, and will help us invoke, you know, maybe even invoke either different connections to existing sort of integrations, or will help us actually build these integrations in the first place. So I know this is what several e-commerce vendors are working on, the ability to digest API definitions and sort of expose capabilities from the, you know, as they materialize the crossover between two systems. That to me is so exciting. It's so foreign to me, given my origin as a developer and having to like read documentation, build things, find out what didn't work the way it was supposed to. But this is what AI will do. And again, it's not that the people working in the space are going to be out of a job. It's just that they also have to evolve along with this technology, and because the technology is going to take care of the thing. One of the ways I like to think about it, and maybe this is helpful if there are any developers that are listening to this, or people who, you know, technology officers, you know, we're not sitting here writing, like looking at requirements and then writing solutions in Hex, right? Because we've been building more and more competent languages. You know, PHP is a 4th generation language. I mean, I think AI is kind of the 5th generation. We abstract ourselves away from the underlying, you know, the underlying technology so that we can work on the work that matters. That is exactly what this AI moment has for us all, and it'll be great. I think the people who should be listening to this message the most are folks working in DevOps. Again, not because it's going to take their job, but because it's going to free them up to work on the next things that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, right? I think you guys both nailed it. If you can take away 80% of that sort of, you know, whatever you want to call it, the boring, rudimentary kind of work, and then really focus your attention on the smarts, right? So it gets you 80% of the way there, and then you know, the real technical meat is in the smarts of what you're able to do as a human. I mean, you want to get there as quick as possible, right? And it kind of reminds me of like years ago. I remember there was this a landscape CAD tool that came out, and designers were sort of intimidated by it, right? Because it was like, well, wait a second, I'm an architect, I'm a designer, I draw by hand, right? And that's my thing. That's what I do. This CAD tool replaced that. It had the same quality, but once people got on board with it, they went, okay, when a customer comes and says they want to make a change, I'm no longer erasing things and redoing them, which takes hours and costs money. I'm literally moving some symbols around and plugging in a new, right? And so once they got on board, they were like, oh, wow, I actually get to use my design skill much better, because I'm not doing all the rudimentary stuff, right, to get to that place. And based on what you've both described, and I feel the same way, it feels like we're there, right? It's not an intimidation or I'm going to lose my job. It's I need to sharpen my skills for sure, but I get to use my smarts on the real good stuff, right? So
well said. Well, great analogy.
Well, we're coming up on the hour, gentlemen, and it looks like we have a couple of questions from the audience. So, David, I don't know if you want to maybe just chime in. I'm not sure how many.
Yeah, I can fire these off, and
okay,
and then jump in from the panel. So we had like 2 AI questions and 1 integration question. So I guess the first question here is, where have you seen AI being implemented with an immediate impact on the business? So I can leave that to the panel here.
Brent?
I'll give 2 parts. Number 1, I'll plug the Copilot AI from Shopware. I mean, immediate impact. I would encourage you to look at all the different features that are available out of the box now. That's so fantastic. Number 2, I would just say, from a marketing standpoint, an immediate impact. If you don't like to type out your social media, feed your blog post or your article or your product into ChatGPT. It's going to come back with some pretty good tweets or LinkedIn or whatever. The immediate impact there is you have to type less.
Yeah, and I've seen it in our business. Well, of course, we had been working on things since ChatGPT came out. I mean, as a company, like it completely altered our 2023 strategy and our priorities even going forward. Again, trying to come up with not sort of PR worthy things, but actually coming up with a sort of functionality that lets people do more and understand better. And then just from a marketing PR standpoint, though, I can say that we do have people who take their technical acumen and their forward-looking perspective, feed it in, and are prompted by this, right? So it's not, and AI is not doing our PR, not doing our marketing. We're still doing that very hands-on, but we have people in this organization who are able to who've never published before, or never published frequently, and they're actually able to put stuff out there now because essentially AI, modern AI, is sort of the antidote to writer's block, and I love that it's actually helping people who haven't maybe had as much of a voice actually get their voice out there, because it's really important, I think, for all of our team to be able to talk about the problems that they're solving and the future that they see.
Nice. Okay, well, let's stay on that. 2 more questions here. Will AI make integration technology more user-friendly, and how is it going to fit in with iPaaS?
Yeah, I think we did talk about that earlier. I think that we're going to have more things where you can just say, I want to do this, instead of, hey, let's get a developer and let's code endpoint 1 to endpoint 2. One of the things is a natural language where we're going to start telling it things. I like Ben's example of, hey, scale up my environment for this weekend because we're going to drop a new something and it's going to cause a ton of traffic, right? You can say, hey, scale up my environment because I'm going to get a ton of traffic. I think from an iPaaS standpoint, we can start saying, please connect my SKUs together. I have a new implementation, but connect my customer records from HubSpot to Shopware. And it's going to do those things at a minimum. And you're going to have to go back and say, hey, I also want my whatever attribute attached. But from the most part, it's going to take what you say and it's going to do it.
Yeah, one of the things, and I mean, so one of, when we released AI Copilot back in May, I mean, it was great. We announced it was already live for our SaaS customers. One of the features that comes to mind is the AI, like automatic analysis of your digital assets, right? And this is, again, this is a problem. So Dave, back to the question earlier, like, what kind of verticals or merchant size does a solution like Shopware for? Well, if you have 10 products, you're not really working with digital asset management. This is not tremendously important. But if you have thousands and thousands, millions of digital assets, multiple languages, et cetera, if you have something, if you're able to just, okay, we've done the photo shoot for the product, maybe some of that was actually there's some AI there because it understands what the back of a product looks like based on the front. Won't even get into that, but auto tagging, be able to organize, find, optimize the storage, the use, the recall, the implementation of these images. Like that is just like the very tip, like just the very beginning of what, where AI comes into this industry. And I think as far as future integrations go, I mean, let's take a recent problem, recent history. I'll invoke COVID with apologies, but like, look at what happened with supply chain, with things changing. Imagine being able, and I was there for all of it. I lived this moment, from the agency perspective. I lived this moment from the merchant perspective, from an industry perspective. Imagine being able to say, okay, we need to now index on our customer communications because supply chain's totally messed up, and being able to issue natural language commands into your solution stack and have your solution stack respond with all the context of research in terms of best practices for upset customers, extraordinary delays. Like this is, if you really start to think about the sort of inexhaustible supply of problems and challenges that can come to this industry over time, and then realize that AI helps create a space and a capacity to respond to that with the staff that you have on hand, and just sort of take their innate knowledge and apply that to challenges they haven't met before. That's really, really powerful. That for me is incredibly exciting, and something that we'll see play out over time. Again, 5-year prediction. We'll see if I'm right.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. So final question, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and I think our awesome panel today as well. Finally, what is the biggest mistake businesses have made when trying to integrate different systems and applications? And let's make this fun. Think of one word first, and then you can answer it to describe that.
Cluster F, like lack of planning. I couldn't say my one word because it involves.
It was a phrase, which is, that's good.
So I feel as though a lot of times businesses rush into something and they say, I need this tomorrow. A great example is, I want to get this development project started and we want you to start on Monday, right? So a lot of times leaders think that development just starts and they don't need planning. So I think that all of these things should encompass a good deal of planning before you start. And from from the agency space, you know when somebody's in a big hurry, that if you don't know what you're doing and you just start doing something, the farther you get down the wrong side of the road, the harder it's going to get to come back. Whereas if you planned on getting there and what you want to do, that you are going to save a lot of time at the far end after to implement that plan.
Yeah, totally. Ben?
Oops. I mean, if I'm limited to one word, it's going to be oops. So I'm going to give myself a softball space. But you know, I mean, and I don't think it totally begs the question. It's, if you think about, you know, it's never inherently wrong. Again, every technology decision has benefits and you know, and a downside. Like there's always this balance, and that balance is different depending on the time, the context, the merchant, right? You know, something could be awesome for one merchant and completely, you know, with a little downside, and then the reverse is true, the inverse is true for another merchant. But if you think about, hey, we've decided we need to integrate this one thing today. Someone read an article in the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or something, like, okay, we need to build this integration today. And they go all in on this thing, build this direct system to system integration. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wow, this system over here needs to understand what's happening between these two, or, oh no, this department needs to control this information, but this information updating needs to go through this system. And then you start to say, well, it becomes, you know, again, referring back to my slowly decaying developer, you know, my time as a developer, context is always dangerous, right? So when two systems are very contextually aware or bound to each other, that can be perfect, right? I mean, that can be that kind of efficiency of direct communication can be great. Sometimes it can be a real impediment to future progress, right? So it can be the case that, and this is a big reason why Jitterbit might even exist in the first place, is, hey, let us have sort of a communication bus. Let us add additional, very, very light context to how these two systems might talk to each other. And wow, okay, cool. So if we basically integrate this system with this thing, and then this thing can talk to all these other things, and we can get a lot of this sort of meta perspective. And for future requirements' sake, if we need to introduce a PIM or an ERP or, you know, order management, whatever, guess what? We don't actually have to then start to chain multiple systems next to each other. We can take you know, the communication that's already happening across this bus and push things out. We could even sort of invert a relationship and say, well, this is now going to be a system of record over here because we've gone global, right? And product information now needs to be internationalized, and it's got a lot of context. And the as far as requirements go, the sky's the limit. Freedom of movement is important, and so I'm always very wary of point to point, like direct integration. Again, it's not inherently bad, but you really should consider about whether that actually solves the problem at hand, and are you leaving room for future growth without having to actually rebuild everything from scratch? Because developers, we hate to do the same thing twice. Don't repeat yourself. Don't waste effort. That's what we're all about.
Nice. Well said. Well, thank you to the panel today. Thanks, Dave, for hosting. Thanks, Brent, for joining. Thanks, Ben. We are at time, and it's been great. We've covered AI, we've covered iPaaS, we've covered oops moments. Yes, the robots are coming, but yes, we need humans still. So there is hope. Thank you for joining us for this.
They're our friends.
Exactly. We're going to post this webinar on the various channels here of the various companies that our panelists come from on our YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us about anything we discussed today or any of the services that any of us provide. And with that, have a great morning, afternoon, or evening. signing off here from Las Vegas and wherever you are. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.